Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again for our weekly Hebrew word study. We have gone into the 22nd chapter of the book of First Samuel. And again, so many wonderful things. I so enjoy studying this, and I hope I can convey and that you pick up some of this excitement. And I just get so excited when I come across this and what the Hebrew words and the study of it yields that I've never seen before in just the English translation. So I hope you can get a little spark of that enthusiasm as we go in today. And so remember, David is fleeing from Saul. Interesting things that we looked at previously, and he last episode he faked being insane, fled from there, and now he is God is moving in his life and bringing him into a different realm that we're going to see today. So it says, Vayelech David Misham Valimalet. So he departed and escaped from there. Kind of interesting. Departing and escaped are almost a double narrative. And so, just interesting how that happened. Maybe there's a little more to how he fled there than what the words or what the narrative leads us to believe that this was an escape. And it said he went to a cave. So he obviously is on his own in the wilderness, again, foraging for himself. He's got this sword of Goliath with him, but that's really all that he's got. He's all by himself. And he goes to this cave in the area called Adulam, which nobody really knows, exactly where that is, but it is mentioned in Joshua as an area that was known, and it was away from civilization. And so obviously this was not a well-kept secret because it said Vaishmeru Echav, it means his brothers, Vichal, um, Beit Aviv, so his brother's house, all of his father's house, and things must have been really bad in the kingdom under King Saul because Vayeredu, they went down a lav Shama, so they went down to where he was. So somehow he got word back to his family, hey, I'm down in the cave of Adullam. And so they all said, okay, well, it's anything is better than where we're at right now is really what this message is telling us. We'd rather go live in a cave than try to survive with the way the society and kingdom is under King Saul, where we fear for our lives. You can read a lot into this narrative. About what made them leave the comforts of their home, made them leave their flocks and their herds and all of their security there, that they felt that their lives were in such danger that they would be better to leave and go live in a cave with no certainty of how they were going to be taken care of. So that's the stage for this. And in fact, it even gets worse. So as we get to verse 2 here, we see that there was gathered together everyone who was in distress. So there's like three qualifications that came upon these people, maybe not qualifications, but conditions that they were in there. They were under distress. They were in, and this is the English translation. We'll compare the Hebrew as we get into this. They were under distress. They were in debt, and everyone who was discontented. So let's take a look at these fun words here. Mitzok or matzok, in distress. This means someone who is oppressed. So this is something, again, lets us understand that this kingdom society under King Saul was not well, that people were feeling distressed and oppressed. And then it uses the word for in debt of noshe. But as we look here, I don't know that in debt is really a good translation. It comes from the word nasha, and it's someone who was beguiled, someone who was deceived. So we see that these were, first you look at this and, okay, these are all the riffraff and rabble rousers who were coming to David. But the words in Hebrew give us a little bit of a different outlook that these were men who were tricked. Society, the conditions that they were living under, beguiled them, caused them to, you know, be in danger. And of course, when you were in debt back in those days, there was no forgiveness program. There was no Chapter 11, Chapter 13 filing for bankruptcy. When you were in debt, your family was sold if you couldn't pay, or you were sold into like an indentured slavery, indentured servanthood until your debt was paid for. So these were men who, at least my understanding when I look at the Hebrew, who were basically honest, uh, upright people who were tricked, that there was lawlessness going on in the society. There was immorality as far as business dealings, and there was just the type of embezzlement and trickery and thievery and stealing, that people were being tricked and they were swindled is probably a good word for it. So, and then they were held accountable to pay their debts, but the people who swindled them were not being held accountable. And so this was causing a lot of distress, and the people were tired of this type of uh, economy and this type of lifestyle that they were living under King Saul. Then we come to the next one that's really fun. Um, you'll see that it says discontented, discontented, that there's two words here, and the word is mar nefesh, and you'll see that there's this little marker here called a makaf that ties them together, meaning they are to be said as one word. And nefesh, you may remember, is the word used for soul. And so this word mar nefesh means that they were embittered of soul, that their soul was so embittered. Um, Also, some of the commentators saying, these were just people who were really angry and had their tempers had been taken to a place where they just couldn't exist in this society anymore, and they had to flee. They felt it was better to leave their homes, leave everything they had, to come to join David. And so he became captain over them. And obviously, this was all caused by the way King Saul was running the country. And there were 400 men that joined him. Obviously, outgrew the cave really quickly. We find in a few chapters this number grew to 600. And so, verse 3, it says David went from there. He couldn't stay in the cave much longer. Everybody knew he was there. So he had to leave. And here he goes to Moab. I find this very, very interesting. And he wants the king of Moab to take care of his mother and father, and that they would watch over them, keep them safe until his mission from God is solidified, and that he knows what God would do for him, what God wanted him to do, and then he'd come back and get his mother and father. Now, this is really interesting, and what I was reminded of is that David's great grandmother was Ruth. And if you remember the story of in the book of Ruth, that Naomi left and went to Moab with her husband Elimelech, and there, they died, and the sons died, and the daughters-in-law, Orpha and Ruth, were going to go back with Naomi back to Jerusalem, back to Israel. And of course, Orpha didn't come, but Ruth came, and Ruth then assimilated into the nation of Israel, married a man, and fathered children. And so that the children that she had were in the lineage of King David, and remembering this is also in the lineage of the Lord Jesus, of the Messiah. So Boaz was the father, if we remember the story correctly. And so um, the Jesse was his grandmother. And so they had ties to Moab. And so they somehow kept this relationship going, of the ancestry. And David thought that his family would be safe there because they were relatives, they were descendants from Moab. What we however, find out is Jesse and the family of David um, are not mentioned again. That maybe some of his brothers are, but Jesse himself is not mentioned. And Rashi, the medieval commentator of the Jews, claims that he reads a Jewish tradition that says that they were murdered after David left them. Now, I couldn't find anything biblically to support that, but I did see that when we get to one day, 2 Samuel chapter 8, David is established as king, and he goes to the Moabites, goes to the king of Moab. He smites them, and all of them become David's slaves. I think that's kind of interesting that they wouldn't just become slaves of the people of Israel, but who's ever left, which seems like a small number, became David's slaves. So he has a personal vendetta against them, and maybe that is where Rashi gets his uh, background from, and to support the feeling that they were, murdered after David left. So again, very interesting. So verse 4, he brought them before the king of Moab. They dwelt there. And also it says all the time that David was with them in the stronghold. And so again, that alludes to that David protected them. And when David's protection was gone, uh, maybe that's implying that they were then not safe, but we don't know for certain. We're going to end the study today with verse 5. Verse 5 is also very interesting, that this prophet Gad comes on the scene. First time ever hear of him. We see that he pops in and out a little bit in David's life. In one place that we'll read of him in the future, he's called David's seer, Seer. We'll investigate that and try to see if the Hebrew can tell us what a seer is compared to, here he's called a Hanavi, a prophet. And so Gad comes to David. Somehow he knew he was there, obviously felt he was on a mission from God, comes to David and provides a prophecy saying, don't stay here. It's you need to depart. You need to go to the land of Judah. And so David, being obedient to what he felt was the word of the Lord from the prophet of the Lord, went to Judah, but dwelt in the forest of Haret. So again, very interesting narrative. We see David being prepared, um, more under God's hand as God's preparing him to eventually be king, and his interaction with King Saul. Now David's got an army of 400 men, and we'll see this start taking place and some very interesting things come up. So hope you enjoyed this little couple 5 verses we went through, and hope you join us again next week as we look into what happens as Saul does some horrendous things to God's chosen priests. All right. God bless you and have a good night. Bye-bye.